Good day, everyone. So, our topic for today is all about the Fisheries Administrative Order under the Article 8, which is the fishing operation. So, as a background of a fishing operation, this means that all activities in connection with searching for fish, the shooting, towing, and hauling of active gears, setting, soaking, and removing or resetting of passive gears, and the removal of any catch from the gear, keep nets, or from a transfer cage to fattening and farming cages. So in short, this is all about the different ways to catch a fish. So as for this article, this includes all the duties and responsibilities of all states. This article includes 11 subtopics. So the first one is the duties of all states. States should ensure that only fishing operations allowed by them are conducted within waters under their jurisdiction, and that these operations are carried out in a responsible manner. So this means that they are only allowed to operate in area wherein it is under their jurisdiction. So the next one, it is also under the duties of all states. States should ensure that health and safety standards are adopted for everyone employed in fishing operation. Such standards should be not less than the minimum requirements of relevant international agreements on condition of work and service. Also, means that also under the duties of all states is not just the area, but also they should ensure the health and safety standards for everyone employed in fishing operation. So the next one is states should maintain a record, updated at regular intervals, on all authorization to fish issued by them. In fishing operation, it is also needed to record on all authorization to fish in order to monitor or update the regular intervals. So the last one, which is under the duties of all states, is lastly, under the duties of states also is to make arrangements individually. This is important to integrate fishing operation into maritime search and rescue system. This could help them to find someone under their operation if ever they were missing. So let's go for the next one, which is the flag state duties. So under the flag state duties, fishing vessels should have their flag to identify which states they belong, and also it could easily trace them by their authority if ever their vessel were gone missing. So the details or records of that specific vessels must be indicated, sample the ownership and the authorization to fish. And then the next one, in the states, according to FAO, standard specification and guidelines for marking and identification of fishing vessels should be marked something on their vessels in accordance with uniform and internationally recognizable. So this means that a vessel should have marked to easily identify which states they belong and what area only they are allowed to fish on high seas or waters under their jurisdiction. This is why other fisher got caught in some states or country. It's because the lapse on their area, and for that they have a consequences to face or penalty to pay for their action. So the next one is the 8.2.3, as what I talked earlier about the vessels that should be marked by them. Also their gear being used must be marked also in accordance with national legislation order, that the owner of the gear can be identified. So the owner of the gear being used must be recorded. It should be uniform and internationally recognizable. The next one is the port state duties. This port state's duties is responsible for the vessels whose in the port. When a fishing vessel is voluntarily in a port or at an offshore terminal of the port state, the flag state of the vessel can request the port state for assistance. This is the responsibility for prevention of pollution and for safety, health, and condition of work on board fishing vessels. Then the next one is the fishing operation. So under this fishing operation, the following ways of fishing were prohibited when it is identified as illegal, like using dynamite, poisoning, and other comparable destructive fishing practices. Also, states are responsible to cooperate to develop and apply technologies that minimize the loss of fishing gear and the ghost fishing effects of lost or abandoned fishing gear. So this is important in order to avoid catching those unwanted species which are identified as endangered. Another responsible of the state is to assess prior to the introduction on a commercial scale of new fishing gear, methods, and operation to an area. This is to avoid habitat disturbance. Lastly, in 8.44, under the fishing operation, research on the environmental and social impacts of fishing gear in particular should be promoted. So the next one is the fishing gear selectivity. So here we are now in fishing gear selectivity. Under to this selectivity, states should, when drawing up their laws and regulation, take into account the range of selective fishing gear, methods, and strategies available to the industry. So this should consider before making up another laws or and regulation that are applicable in that certain area or industry. In 5.2, states should require that fishing gear methods and practices to the extent practicable and are sufficiently selective so as to minimize waste, discards, catch of non-target species, both fish and non-fish species. With regard to this, fishers should cooperate in the development of selective fishing gear and methods. Also, states should ensure that information on new developments and requirements is made available to all fishers. So last part of my topic is the energy optimization. With regard to this, states should promote the development of appropriate standards and guidelines which would lead to the more efficient use of energy in harvesting and post-harvest activities within the fisheries sector. So this means that they are also responsible to promote those newly developed machinery if ever there is the more efficient use of energy in harvesting and post-harvest activities within the fishery sectors. So the last one is the 6.2. States should promote the development and transfer of technology in relation to energy optimization within the fishery sector to fit energy optimization devices to their vessels. So that's it. My topic end here. The next slide will be discussed by my partner to the support, Mr. CHRYSLER LADRES.
So kanay is continuation lang ni siya sa report ni Marilou sa protection of the aquatic environment. States should introduce and enforce laws and regulations based on the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, 1973, as modified by Protocol of 1978 relating thereto, MARPOL 73 to 78. Based sa International Convention, ang pagmugna sa law and regulation usa siya makatabang para sa pag-prevent sa pollution sa ship. Then, owners, charterers, and managers of fishing vessels should ensure that their vessels are fitted with appropriate equipment as required by Marpol 73 to 78, and should consider fitting a shipboard, compactor, and or incinerator to relevant classes of vessels in order to treat garbage and other shipboard waste created during the vessel's normal service. In Marpol 73 to 78, once ikaw ang owners or managers sa usa ka fishing vessels, dapat imong mga kagamitan is fitted labi na ang shipboard. Gina-consider siya kay usa siya ka vessels nga ang treat niya is garbage, then napay ibang shipboard nga naga-generate sa mga hugaw during normal service sa mga vessels. Owners, caterers, and managers of fishing vessels should minimize the taking aboard of potential garbage through proper provisioning practices. So, the manager of fishing vessels, dapat niya i-minimize ang pag-aboard sa vessels para sa potential garbage o sa proper provisioning practices. The crew of fishing vessels should be conversant with proper shipboard procedures in order to ensure discharges do not exceed the levels set by Marpol 73 to 78. Such procedures should, as a minimum, include the disposals of oily waste and the handling and storage of shipboard garbage. So, sa kanina paragraph, gina-state niya nga ang crew sa fishing vessels dapat kabalo sa procedure pag shipboard. So, ang procedures nasa the minimum labi na pag-dispose sa oily waste o ang butanganan sa garbage in shipboard. So, proceed na sa protection of the atmosphere. States should adopt relevant standards and guidelines, which will include provisions for the reduction of dangerous substances and exhaust gas emissions. In protections of the atmospheres, nag-adapt og mga guidelines. Isa na ang pag-reduct sa dangerous substances and exhaust gas emissions. So, owners, carters, and managers of fishing vessels should ensure that their vessels are fitted with equipment to reduce emissions of ozone-depleting substances. The responsible crew member of fishing vessels should be conversant with the proper running and maintenance of machinery on board. Like I said, gaina, owners and manager sa fishing vessels dapat ila sure nga fitted ilang mga equipment para pag-reduce emission ozone depleting substances. So, owners or managers of fishing vessels should take appropriate action to refit existing vessels with alternative refrigerants to CFCs and HCFC and alternative in firefighting installations. Such alternatives should be used in specification for all new fishing vessels. Ang mga owner or taga-pamahala ng mga fishing vessels dapat magbuhat sila ng mga actions para ma-refit ang mga kasalukuyang sasakyang pandagat na may alternatibong CFC and HCFC. Then, ang mga alternatibong panlaban sa sunog magamit ni siya labi na sa mga bag-ohon na mga mangingisda or kana mga mananagat. Then, states and owners, caterers, and managers of fishing vessels, as well as fishers should follow international guidelines for the disposals of CFC and HCFC and halons. Gina-state jud nga ang mga fishers dapat mo-follow sa mga international guidelines. So, proceed sa harbors and landing places for fishing vessels. States should take into account inter alia the following in the design and construction of harbors and landing places. Then, safe havens for fishing vessels and adequate servicing facilities for vessels, vendors, and buyers are provided. Ang fishing vessels nag-adequate siya vessels facilities. Then gi-provide pod diri ang mga vendor o mga buyers para sa mga nangakuha nila nga mga isda or mga fishes. Then adequate freshwater supplies and sanitation arrangements should be provided. Then gi-state sab diri nga ang pag-provide sa freshwater supplies o sa sanitation arrangement, then waste disposal systems should be introduced, including for the disposal of oil, oily water, and fishing gear. Then pollution from fisheries activities and external sources should be minimized. An arrangement should be made to combat the effect of erosion and siltation. States should establish an institutional framework for the selection or improvement of sites for harbors for fishing vessels, which allow for consultation among the authorities responsible for coastal area management. So dapat jud naka-establish og institution framework para sa pag-improve sa sites for harbors and fishing vessels. Then proceed na sa abandonment of structures and other materials. States should ensure that the standards and guidelines for the removal of redundant offshore structures issued by the international maritime organizations are followed. States should also ensure that the competent fisheries authorities are consulted prior to decisions being made on the abandonment of structures and other materials by the relevant authorities. So, dapat tiyakin ng mga estado ang pamantayan at patnubay para sa pag-alis ng mga kalabisan na strukturang malayo sa pampang na inisyu ng International Maritime Organization ay sinusunod. So, dapat po ding gitiyak ng mga estado na ang mga kampatang autoridad sa pangisda ay kinakonsult adisir ang mga desisyon na ilahang gibuhat sa pag-abandona ng mga istruktura at iba pang mga kagamitan sa mga nauugnay na autoridad. Then artificial reefs and fish aggregation device states should ensure that when se- states should ensure that when selecting the materials to be used in the creation of artificial reefs as well as when selecting the geographical location of such artificial reefs, the provision of relevant international convention concerning the environment and safety of navigation are observed. So, ang pag-create og artificial reefs, dapat jud mag-select og mga materials para sa pag-select sa geographic artificial reefs. Then, then state should, within the framework of coastal area management plan, establish management system for artificial reefs and fish aggregation devices. Such management system should require approval for the construction and deployment of such reefs, and device should take into account the interests of fishers, including artisanal and subsistence fishers. So, example ani is, fishers sila nga nasa mga coastal area, so pwede sila maghimo og buhat or sa mga artificial reefs, labi na ang pagbuhat og payaw or pag labog sa payaw sa para mahimo siyang artificial reefs. Og payaw is means fish aggregation device. Tungod sa usa ni siya makatabang sa isa ka populasyon sa mga species sa isda, pwede ra sila sa payaw mangitog or mataguan. Then, states should ensure that the authorities responsible for maintaining cartographic records and charts for the purpose of navigation as well as relevant environmental authorities are informed prior to the placement of removal of artificial reefs or fish aggregation device. So, gi-state sab if baklason ang mga artificial reefs, include ang payaw, dapat yun ipabalo sa isa mga authorities para ma-maintain ang cartographic records and charts sa siya ka-purpose sa navigation. So, that's all my task.